I mean, hey everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Shayna. I will be discussing historical locations that are known to be haunted. I'll dive into the history of the places, and we will talk about the theories of who is haunting the locations. For this video, we will be talking about Tombstone. Now, I feel like everybody and their mother knows about Tombstone. Whether or not you know the history, I feel like everyone has heard of it at least once in their lifetime and know that it's known to be haunted. I have actually never been to Tombstone, but now Tombstone is known as the town too tough to die. Back in 1877, there was a prospector named Ed Schieffelin, and he was on a scouting voyage when he noticed there were pretty rich colors on the mountain that he was near, and he wanted to go and explore. Now, he was with some soldiers who advised against him going off on his own because they were worried about the Apache Indians. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm really sorry if I'm not. But instead of him worrying about them, he actually ended up finding silver. Now, after Ed's discovery, it wouldn't be long until everyone would flock to that area and start mining for gold and silver. Soon the town was created near the mines in 1878, and later it would be called Tombstone. Tombstone was home to more than 100 saloons, many eateries, a red light district, some newspapers, churches, and schools. It quickly became a boom town in 1879, and it was known that approximately 20,000 residents were living in that area. So now that we kind of dove into how the town was created and who founded it, let's start talking about some of the big names. First, we'll talk about Wyatt Earp. Now, who is Wyatt Earp, you might ask? I certainly didn't know until I started researching him. Wyatt was well known as the frontier lawman in the American West. He was a very soft-spoken man who was also known to have nerves of steel. He would survive many gunfights, and he was also known to have patience and a very resolute manner. He was also a buffalo hunter, a miner, a car dealer, a stagecoach driver, a saloon owner, and essentially a jack of all trades. Now, Wyatt decided to move to Tombstone December of 1879, where he would soon partner up with an Oriental saloon owner and run his own gaming business. He would also have a side job as a shotgun rider for Wells Fargo. Now, some of the other big players that were well known in Tombstone was Doc Holliday and Big Nose Kate. Doc Holliday was known as the deadly doctor of the American West. He was a gambler, a gunfighter, and a gentleman. Him and Wyatt Earp were really good friends. Now, Big Nose Kate was Doc Holliday's on-again, off-again girlfriend, and she would be known to be the first one to start a brothel in Tombstone. Now, before Wyatt would come to Tombstone, that town had problems with cowboys who would be rustling cattle and robbing stagecoaches. Now, these cowboys would typically be known as the Clanton Gang. It was Old Man Clanton and his three sons, Ike, Finn, and Billy. Now, Doc Holliday and the Earp brothers would constantly find themselves at odds with the cowboy faction. Now, there was an historical gunfight that would occur on October 26th of 1881, and it would be known as the 32nd Shootout. And that was where approximately 30 or more bullets would be shot in about 30 seconds. This gunfight was between Virgil and Morgan Earp, who were Wyatt Earp's brothers, as well as Wyatt, along with Doc Holliday, and they were against the 5 Clanton members. The fight would leave Billy Clanton, Tom, and Frank McClory dead. Now, I'm really sorry if I'm messing up these names. I'm not very good with pronouncing names, so just work with me. Virgil Earp ended up taking a shot in the leg, and Morgan would suffer from a bullet wound to the shoulder. Now, the Earp men and Doc Holliday would be tried for murder, but it was determined that they were working within the law at that time. However, the cowboy gang did end up getting their revenge and killed Morgan Earp March 18th of 1882. Soon after that, Wyatt and Warren Earp, as well as Doc Holliday, would end up leaving Tombstone and going to Tucson and tracking down each of the Clanton gang one by one over the next 2 years, killing them all. And they would never return to Tombstone after that. Now, I kind of wanted to go over those names because we go into the history of the buildings, you won't get confused. The first building I would like to dive into is known as the Birdcage Theater. 1881, William Billy Hutchison and his wife Lottie would open the most prominent theater in Tombstone, and that was known as the Birdcage Theater. This theater was a gambling hall, a saloon, and a brothel. It opened its doors on Christmas Day in 1881 and would end up closing down in 1889. This theater would be known as the wickedest and wildest night spot between the Barbary Coast and Basin Street. Sounds wild. There were 26 deaths and approximately 140 bullet holes can be seen in the walls and ceilings. Many famous people would come and hang out at the Birdcage, such as Lillian Russell, Lotta Crabtree, and Eddie Foy Sr. would perform on that stage. Now the others that would come to the party would be the Clantons, the Earps, Bat Masterson, Doc Holliday, and Pete Spence. Now the basement of the Birdcage would be known as the poker room. Apparently the longest running poker game in history was played there. Now, this game was played for 24 hours a day that lasted 8 years, 5 months, and 3 days, and over $10 million would exchange hands. The only reason why the game stopped was because groundwater had seeped into the mines, which in turn ended up flooding a lot of the buildings. Now, since 1934, the Birdcage is now known as a museum. Now, this old building has the reputation in Tombstone for being the most haunted, and it has allegedly 31 ghosts. The most popular sighting is a stagehand that he is seen walking across the stage with a clipboard, with black striped pants and a visor. Other common occurrences are people will hear laughter and music, usually around nighttime. Other people will hear faint sounds of a woman singing, and sometimes the sound system will turn on by itself and it'll be playing old-timey music. Some will smell sharp scents of cigar smoke as well as whiskey. Even after closing time, some of the staff has claimed to hear glasses clanking and cards shuffling. I don't know about you, but if I heard that and I knew the building was empty, I'd be gone. Now, in 1921, a school was built right across the street from the Birdcage Theater. The students would report hearing laughter and music, and they would claim to smell a strong scent of cigar smoke. Now they have this massive dice table. It's like hundreds of pounds, and some staff members came in to open up and they noticed that that whole table was moved, and it was moved like feet away, and it took 8 men to put it back. Now the Birdcage Theater has a statue of Wyatt Earp, and they have him sitting up in a crib overlooking the theater. When it was first placed there, the staff would come in to open up, and they would notice that Wyatt's hat that was placed on his head would end up on the floor, and they would be like, how did that get there? One time a staff member came in and they saw that Wyatt's statue was completely turned around and his back was facing the viewing area. Later, a historian came in and mentioned how Wyatt was actually sitting in the crib that was usually reserved for the Clantons. Once they were told this, they ended up moving Wyatt's statue to the crib where he would frequent, and that's when the hat tossing would stop. So either he was like, I need out of this booth, or someone was like, I need him out of this booth. Next is the Schieffelin Hall. Only the most respectable people in Tombstone would go to the Schieffelin Hall for entertainment. This building opened its doors in 1881, and it was built by Al, who was Ed Schieffelin's brother. Now, this sophisticated establishment was more than just a theater. It was also used as a recital hall and a meeting venue for the people in Tombstone. Now, the Schieffelin Hall has been completely restored today, and it is known to be home to many different spirits. Some will say it is the most haunted but overlooked building in Tombstone. The most common thing that people will hear and experience is the sounds of chain rattling or spurs like on the cowboys' boots. During a ghost tour, an entire group heard these sounds. I bet everyone was freaking out. I know I would have been. The next building is Big Nose Kate's Saloon. Now, Big Nose Kate's Saloon was originally one of the most finest hotels in Tombstone. It was very luxurious. It was filled with beautiful oil painting. It had 16 bedrooms, and each room had beautiful walnut furnishings, toilet stands, beautiful fixtures, and wallpaper. The lobby had chandeliers hanging from the ceilings, and the kitchen had both hot and cold water, which is not very common back then. The first few years, some of the people that would stay there were very famous in Tombstone, and that was Wyatt and Virgil Earp, Doc Holliday, and the Clanton Gang. Now, there was an employee who used to work at the hotel, and everyone called him Swamper. He was a janitor who did kind of odd jobs, did everything that anyone really needed to be done around the hotel. He also would live in the basement. He was done with his shift, he'd just go down to the basement into where he would stay. Well, this basement would end up having its own mine shaft. So while Swamper was off work, he would go down there and do a little mining himself. Now, there is a theory or a rumor that he did find silver and buried it somewhere, and no one knows where it's at. Unfortunately, there were 2 fires that happened in Tombstone, and the second one ended up burning the hotel down in 1882. And the fire would only leave 7 graceful arches and the floor joists on the main level. The rest of the building unfortunately collapsed into the basement. Now, the structure has been rebuilt and some changes were made, and then it was turned into Big Nose Kate's Saloon. Nowadays, the bar that was in the basement is now on the main level, and the basement is now a gift shop. There are a few well-known spirits that like to linger at this saloon, and one is believed to be Swamper. Staff and tourists have claimed to see Swamper. They claim to find him in the halls, stairways, and especially down in the basement. They believe that Swamper never left because he wanted to protect his silver. Other spirits that people have claimed to see are cowboys or dressed up like cowboys. They like to appear at the bar or in doorways, and they're also known to knock over cases of beer that will be in the basement. Other strange occurrences would seem to happen in the staircase leading to the basement. Some female employees have claimed to be pushed as they are getting off the last stair down to the basement. They claim to feel someone pushing them. One woman employee claimed to feel these clammy, cold hands wrap around her throat. I'd be like, I quit. Next is Boothill Graveyard. Now, this graveyard used to be a huge part of Tombstone. It was founded in 1879 and was used until the new cemetery was opened in 1884. Now, most people who are buried in Boothill are victims of a shootout. Fortunately, the cemetery would be neglected and the gravestones would be taken from vandals. However, they did try to clean up and restore the graveyard in the 1920s and ended up placing grave markers. Visitors will report hearing noises and seeing strange lights out in the cemetery. Spirits have been spotted in many occasions out there, and some of them like to appear in pictures. Billy Clanton, who was killed in the 32nd shootout, known to rise from his grave and walk along the road back to Tombstone. Creepy. Next is OK Corral. Now, in a narrow vacant lot is where the 32nd shootout ended up happening. It didn't happen at the OK Corral like people assume. It just happened near it. Witnesses would claim to have spotted fading apparitions that would look like cowboys, often appearing with their guns drawn. Some professionals think that it's residual, like they're reliving that event over and over again, thinking that they're preparing for the 32nd shootout battle that did occur near there. Wouldn't that be scary? You walk along the corner and all of a sudden you see this cowboy with his gun drawn. Next is Nellie Cashman's restaurant. Nellie Cashman's restaurant was also known as Rest House and was owned by the Old West's original female entrepreneur, as well as a prospector and angel of mercy known for her charity, courage, and determination. Cashman made her way to Tombstone in 1880, where she opened Rest House. That was both a restaurant and a boarding house. Although many believe that Nellie Cashman's restaurant is haunted, most don't believe it's Nellie herself, that someone else is haunting it. Often when the staff arrive in the morning, they will notice that objects have been moved. They will also report hearing strange noises, crashing sounds, even muted voices that can be heard throughout the whole building. And they tend to make themselves known to the non-believers. In fact, there was a customer that was visiting there once, and she was mocking the ghost. Next thing she knows, there's a bottle of mustard flipping into the air and completely covering her in mustard. Serves you right. Others seem to see the apparition of a woman, and some think that it's Nellie herself. However, Nellie actually ended up dying in Canada. So experts believe that this woman is someone who lived in the boarding house and was murdered by a man who was also living there. Now, I don't know if that really happened. I don't know if there's records of that. I didn't get a chance to look that far into it, but that is the theory. Next is Buford House. Now, the Buford House was an 1880s adobe home. It now serves as a bed and breakfast. In the late 19th century, George Buford, a gold prospector, lived in the house with his father and fell in love with a girl who lived across the street, and her name was Petra. One night, George and Petra left together to go to an outing with some friends. Now, for some reason, we don't exactly know what happened, but for some reason, Petra decided to leave with another man, have him walk her home. And this left George heartbroken. He was so upset. He just thought that he lost the love of his life and he didn't know what to do. Later, Petra came to visit George, and he was so angry that he ended up shooting her twice and then turning the gun on himself. Now, Petra would overcome her wounds, but George, unfortunately, he did not. Both current owners and guests claim to see George walking into the home, and sometimes they'll see him walking outside in the front of the home. Sometimes the doorbell will ring in the middle of the night, and there have been reports of knocking on walls, the faucets turning on and off, and strange lights appearing from nowhere. Now, what's really creepy is some women claim to feel some invisible force stroking their hair or touching the back of their necks. Like, George, back off. Well, that's it for me, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you stayed at Tombstone and if you have had any experiences, good or bad. Just tell me your stories. Also, give me some recommendations on what you would like to hear from me, what stories you've heard of or places you've heard of that are known to be extremely haunted and want me to dive into it. Let me know. Anyways, guys, thanks for joining.